Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2. This season. I really liked a lot of this season, but this is the greatest example of a mixed bag season of television that I may have ever seen in my life. I really liked that first season of the show. Let's start with what I liked here. I really liked the stuff with. Actually, let's start with something different. So, when I mentioned before when I started this show that I really was curious to see why people kind of stopped talking about this show, and I kind of see why. Because this season has a certain subplot that we'll get into when I get into the negatives of kind of why this whole thing cannot be considered canon anymore, even though it started off in a place that was really good, tied into the MCU really well. But yeah, we'll talk about that. So I love this first part of the series, or this season, which is mostly focused on kind of tying in the events of Captain America Civil War, or not Civil War, Winter Soldier, and what happened with S.H.I.E.L.D. in that movie. And the way that's explored and put together is actually really well done, and I thought it worked out really well. But then you get to the second half of the season where we start talking about the Inhumans and all that stuff. And if you've seen that Inhumans show, which I will never, ever, ever do a video on, unless we get an Inhumans movie, and then I probably will. But for the most part, I will never do a video on the Inhumans. What a disaster of a television show. And so, knowing that the Inhuman stuff is no longer canon, nobody liked that stuff, and understanding all that stuff, it really just makes me frustrated because I never, ever want to deal with the Inhuman stuff. And the way it's done in this season, even during that show, because this came out quite a bit before that show ever came out. It doesn't really matter. Like, it wasn't good, and it's pretty fucking terrible, and I'm not really sure why they chose to do what they did here. It just did not work, and I really hated it. And no one should ever, ever talk about this shit. Like, wow. That shit was rough. I really hope we get a great reboot of the Inhumans. It was nice seeing Black Bolt and Doctor Strange. But I don't know. But that's kind of what I mean when I say this season's a mixed bag. Because it's got certain aspects of the season I really like. But, yeah. And then, even going into season 3, which I start tomorrow, I can tell we got still more of that subplot. And it's just not exciting. I don't really like the Inhuman stuff. It's pretty terrible, and I really am not excited to talk about more of that stuff. But we'll talk about that next month when I talk about season 3.